My name is Barton Morris. This is Nick Galendis. We are lawyers with the Cannabis Legal Group. This is Cannabis Live, coming from our Royal Oak office live in December, probably our last show of the year. So we thought it'd be appropriate to talk about the developments that we've seen this past year in 2019 and make some predictions about what we believe that we're going to see and what we're excited to see in 2020. So let's just jump right into it, right, Nick?
Yeah. Bart and I were talking about how much to talk about and what to talk about, and there was so much that happened this year. A lot of people might even forget that the licensing board was a thing way back in March and everything. We've talked about that a lot, so that isn't included on here. But the first thing we wanted to talk about, kind of the most newsworthy topic, I believe, is the adult use licensing and sales system and framework happened in Michigan. Obviously, back in 2018, in November, we passed the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, which was to be implemented by late December. It ended up being implemented earlier, and the MRA started taking applications on November 1st. By the time it came to December 1st, there had already been some applicants who were Step 1 approved and pre-qualified and were rolling in their licenses as well. And what we did was we had three locations, three provisioning centers, three retailers on December 1st that had sold adult use to individuals 21 and over. And I believe that the figures from that one day were around $220,000. And now we have about, I think, over, $3 million or so in sales since December 1st. So
it's been about 3 weeks, and there's over $3 million in sales. And we just said that we weren't going to talk about the licensing board, but what's fascinating is that because we got rid of the licensing board, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency was able to accelerate the time within which that they were processing applications, and they were even able to take the applications that they've been, or the manner in which that they were processing them for the medical licensing, and they were able to apply that to the recreational licensing. And now we see a year after the law became effective, we have $3 million in sales already. So actually, I think the board is an interesting topic because we see how much it was slowing things down, right? I mean, like now we're ahead of schedule, right? I think that the regulatory agency has a policy and a priority to ensure that they're getting out as many licenses as possible. I think that you would agree, since we do a lot of this work, that they are very diligent in getting through our license applications, right? So I can't imagine having any better of a scenario. I mean, I know that there's cities in our state, but also other states that are trying to introduce their programs. It's taking a long time. So seemingly our state program, even though certainly I'm sure a lot of people would say it's still not enough, there's not enough supply out there, but still I think that if we were to look at where we're at now a year ago, I think we'd be encouraged. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of complaints that could be made about, the rollout of the program or the length of time that it's taken to get people, licenses up and running. But at the same time, each state's unique. I know Oklahoma had nothing, and then they had a bunch of stores out, and they issued licenses very quickly. I don't know if that's necessarily the best option either when the whole market's flooded with a bunch of new open stores. Oregon has its own issues with supply there too. So, I think each state's going to have its own problems. But if you really compare to where we were at last year, certainly there's been so much more progress. That map is filling up with different locations. More of Michigan's being filled itself, more testing labs are popping up, more secure transporters. Now we have the adult use system as well, and we'll continue to hopefully to be seeing that at the municipal level opening up too, so that we can get the fuller map, get more licensees on board, get more supply on both sides, and really have a healthy, thriving industry.
And I think that what we've seen thus far is an indication that we're going to have a healthy industry, a healthy consumer demand based upon the number of sales that we've had thus far. With the very limited number of stores that we have been able to get open so far, clearly this is a very exciting time, and over the next year, over the next 12 months, I think when we sit in here and think about where we're at 12 months from now, we're going to be living in a completely new life. I mean, the speed at which that the marijuana industry moves is lightning, and 6 months goes by, 12 months goes by. It really just seems like very like just recently when we. I remember like taking a picture with you, after we won that election. It seemed like it was just yesterday, So I would imagine that the same thing's going to happen a year from now, and we're going to have a good number of stores, a lot of more information as to what our demand is going to be like and what our industry is going to be like. So I guess I'm very excited to see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think too what's happening is you're seeing cities opting in for both. I know Berkeley is going to, Royal Oak's talking about it, City of Westland.
Yeah.
More and more of them are coming on board and saying, okay, we've waited and seen enough. We want to opt in. We're going to do both at the same time. So I think this year will be good if everyone keeps up to date on what's going to happen, what's happening locally with opting in. There will be more opportunities there. I think in a year we'll have temporary events that have taken place. We'll have designated consumption establishments. The social use lounges is actually up and running. And a lot more people, I think, will have been to a retailer's store to actually purchase. I haven't been to one yet. I know the lines are probably still long, but I think that's just kind of an exciting opportunity for everybody who is able to take part in that if they so choose. So I think there's a lot of different things that will be happening in 2020.
I think I look forward to seeing a social consumption establishment. That's going to be something that's really cool. Hopefully we're the first one to get one licensed and operational. All right, so I think actually we can jump to the next topic, which is not necessarily so encouraging and positive, which is the fact that there's been a significant national scare with respect to vaping, right? Vape cartridges and vitamin E acetate, and the fact that the Marijuana Regulatory Agency they halted the sales of those products so they all can be tested, and that has had a significant effect on the industry, a lot of the operators.
Yeah, and that was a bit of a shock. And I think at the beginning half of the year, we had, at the cannabis industry, at the state and local level, had a lot of victories with just different ballots working and then the licensing board going away and a lot of positive changes. And then it kind of hit pretty quickly with, I know there was a flavored vape ban that happened a little bit before that, but then, all of a sudden you hear about this going on in, was it Massachusetts, or, there was some buzz about it. And then some states such as New Jersey, I think California said they supported banning, flavored vapes and everything like that. And then it was kind of a question, is it from THC cartridges? Is it from nicotine vape cartridges? And then finally the MRA weighed in and said, okay, we're going to follow the trend and say none of these can be sold or consumed or should be consumed until they're properly tested. So all of the testing labs had to go back and test those batches again, specifically for vitamin E acetate, making sure it's under that level of that low threshold.
Action level.
Action level. And really around that time too was around November 1st. So I think a lot of people were getting ready to open up their adult use stores. There was a lot of confusion. I remember talking to one of our clients that we have that has an open provisioning center saying, what am I supposed to do with my product? What if what comes back gets tested, doesn't pass the test, and then who's on the line for all of that failed product? What am I supposed to do? The MRA was very helpful in getting those emergency rules and kind of the, what to test for and how to do that in metric and kind of put those to the side and wait until those tests have passed. Most of them so far seem to have passed the test for not having vitamin E acetate or not having it in that high of a level. But we did, I think this week recently, get news that there were a few provisioning centers that had product that failed testing. The MRA was very clear in saying that all of that product was caregiver product that was taken in from the grower processor side of things and eventually made its way to provisioning center. So now there's new rules kind of around that. Vitamin E always has to be tested. There has to be active and inactive ingredients listed on the product labels so that customers know exactly what's being put into it as a solvent or additive as well, just to kind of continue to evolve our testing practices to make sure everybody's safe.
Another angle is that this entire news has created an apprehension of consumers to be even using these products in the first place. There's a lot of people that I've run into that says we're not using vape cartridges anymore. We just don't know what we're getting. People are getting sick, they're dying, and they're not reacting well with the vape cartridges. And people are thinking, well, is it the cartridge? Is it the battery? Am I inhaling something that is going to kill me? Literally, I mean, there's a literal scare or like a concern that consumers have, and not really having an understanding. And so when you're introducing something within your body and you're using something that's that's being initiated by an electrical current, that's going into something that really hasn't even been tested, and oftentimes tested for tested products or licensed products, but not necessarily all this stuff is licensed. It causes a consumer concern. So that's a negative thing that the industry has had to deal with recently. And I think it's a reflection of the fact that that's how new the industry is. And these are the types of things that happen. This is not going to happen in the alcohol industry or the tobacco industry, because it's been so long. It's just so long standing that all of these issues are not issues, whereas the marijuana industry, this is new for us. And so this is just an example of what could occur and the risks that are inherent in a new industry. Okay, let's move on and talk about a little bit what we mentioned before with respect to our new regulatory or adult use of marijuana. It comes with new license types, and we talked about, for instance, a social consumption establishment, a place. It's coming. I'm telling you, there's going to be places where people can consume marijuana. Adults can consume cannabis either through vaping, edibles, but particularly smoking, pipes, bongs, joints, at a place where it's going to be legal and it's going to be permissible. I mean, this is something nobody's ever seen. You know what I mean? Like, I have been to California, Colorado. I've seen marijuana being sold. I've never seen a place where somebody can go and actually consume it. Even in Vegas, I know they're getting ready to do that. I saw Planet 13. I was just in Las Vegas last week. It's absolutely humongous how large these places are going to be. We're going to have that here in Michigan, and perhaps one of the first in the country, which is super exciting to me.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, because every operator has to submit what's called a responsible operations plan, especially if you're a retailer, to make sure that you're monitoring, to make sure that nobody's over intoxicated, that you're not selling to minors. And for a designated consumption establishment, that's going to be pretty interesting to see what their plan is, because not only do you have to monitor and know, the signs for being intoxicated or, under the influence of marijuana are a lot different than if you're in a bar stumbling around, slurring your words. A lot of people have different tolerances. Obviously, that's a big issue with driving while impaired, issues with cannabis. But I think I've heard from other states and possibly Canada that it's, I think people are, when they think of a social lounge, they're thinking of, okay, I got a huge bag or huge bin of joints and we're just smoking all night. I think that these operators are going to limit how much can be sold just to make sure that they're safe. Especially, if I saw you drive in to the store, let you smoke 5 blunts or something, and then saw you drive off, that's the same thing as a dram shop issue where, I had the responsibility not to overserve you, and then I saw you leave, and that might fall on me, the operator. So I think everybody who's thinking of opening one, they'll definitely have to kind of figure out what the happy medium is between, I'm opening this up, it's very, a lot of regulatory fees need to go into this and construction, and I need to make money, but at the same time, I don't want to be endangering the public by over-serving too much product to them while they're at my location that I could potentially get sued for. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Liability will definitely be an issue, although I think it's going to be administered a bit differently than alcohol, in the sense that when somebody consumes cannabis, particularly through inhalation, the peak effects happen in less than an hour. In fact, a half hour, right? And then those effects are going to largely be dissipated very quickly thereafter. Whereas with alcohol, most people are familiar with the fact that they can consume and not safely drive a motor vehicle hours after drinking. And so when people are actually drinking in a bar or a place where people are drinking, restaurant, whatever it may be, they potentially cannot be safe to drive for a very long period of time. Whereas in a consumption establishment, marijuana social consumption establishment, that's not necessarily going to be the case. So it's going to be different. The elimination and the effects of cannabis on a human body are different than an alcohol And let me tell you something, they're vastly different. For instance, there's people that consume cannabis on a very frequent, chronic basis, and their tolerance, I mean, they could be fully tolerant, which means that some people can actually consume marijuana and completely be sober. You know what I mean? Like, as far as like our the effects on the body, maybe not sober is not the best word, but like their ability to drive isn't significantly affected to the degree that people like a naive users would. So really, there's going to be the responsibility of the operator to really try to understand and visually identify somebody that's impaired, right? And as opposed to, even though somebody may have consumed a lot, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're intoxicated or shouldn't be able to drive. So it's different. Marijuana is different than alcohol. These establishments are going to be different, and they're all going to play out. Again, it's a new thing. It's a new concept. There's going to be new rules and a new manner of which to administer it and to conceptualize it. It's fascinating.
And to go along with that, there's going to be the temporary events which you have to apply to be an event organizer first, and then you have to have the municipality on board with that, get licensees, either retailer establishments and or micro businesses, to be at your event and say exactly where it's going to be and what kind of security you're going to have. So I think, to my knowledge, one licensed temporary event hasn't been thrown yet, but it definitely will be in 2020. So that'll be exciting to see where it'll be, what municipality will be on board for that first, and what licensees will attend, and what will really happen. I assume there'll be music and food in different areas, and then the sales floor within that, kind of like the beer tent where there's that product's being sold.
The one example that I keep thinking about, whether it's right or wrong, is a movement festival at Hart Plaza. And it probably not going to happen this year, or perhaps it may. No, I don't think actually it could. It's because it's Memorial Day weekend, so it'll be next June, end of May. But I know one for a fact is that there have been medical marijuana vendors there selling cannabis without a problem. That's been going on for years. So now it might be a good idea for the event organizers to actually get a license to be able to do so and be able to then sell recreationally. I mean, I would imagine that they're probably interested in doing that, because that is going to open up quite a scene at Hart Plaza, for movement, something that I generally like to attend. I enjoy the music that I hear there, and there's a lot of people that do as well.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if Hash Bash has to get a license. I know there's arguments that maybe it shouldn't. It's a very traditional gathering of people at U of M.
Also a public university.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I'm not saying either way if it is or if it should or shouldn't, but it'll be interesting to see if anybody makes them or they go ahead and do that on their own.
And then there's going to be other people that are just creating events just for the sake of being able to do it. Perhaps in Ann Arbor, because, I don't know if Ann Arbor has authorized that yet. I don't think that they have. I don't think any city have seen that yet. Even cities that have gone forward, and like Berkeley and these cities have moved forward and said, yes, we're going to permit recreational facilities, but not necessarily social consumption establishment or a temporary operator. Yeah, but they can change that later on.
I know Mount Pleasant's one that's allowing temporary events, but not social consumption lounges. So,
all right,
we'll see.
Legal marijuana delivery. I think that this is a fascinating subject. It's fascinating in the sense that it's the most easiest way to be able to be in receipt of some marijuana, right? People can literally order it from their homes. They can go on a website and have it delivered to their homes. And we're not just talking about the potential for medical marijuana, but we're also talking about recreational marijuana too. It's in demand. There's a significant consumer demand for it. It is a license. It's an option that's going to be available for retailers and provisioning centers. I see this as being a very huge thing for 2020.
Yeah, and that was interesting because I think the MRA eventually they rolled it out for the medical system. You started seeing, I think the first one was in Detroit, and then I think Portage or Kalamazoo area had one, and then Detroit got another one. And that's really to serve, the patient population. A lot of them in those areas don't have transportation, and it's helpful to them, but also helpful because a lot of municipalities haven't opted in yet. So depending on the radius of that delivery service, ends up allowing some of those patients in those other areas that are even farther away to actually get the product. And now for adult use, kind of the same situation. There's even fewer communities that have opted in for adult use, but those who do have delivery services in adult use areas and can deliver kind of around the general area, not just in the municipality, I think will definitely have a upper hand in, you know, kind of a business sense of things, and also just kind of from a consumer goodwill standpoint. I can say that, you know, I've helped some of our clients out with a delivery plan, and it kind of raises more, just like with the lounges. There's so many things you have to think about. You know, is it going to be a company car? Is it going to be the employee's car? How far are we going to deliver? You have to have GPS systems or a phone to, you know, track that person's location at every single minute. There's things you have to worry about for if there's any, you know, you have to follow a specified route, if there's any delays.
How many deliveries can be made in one trip? Is that?
Yeah, and so there were 10. They limited it to 10, but now in these new rules, what I think they're doing is they're kind of tying it more to the price of what's being, you know, transported.
Of product that's being transported as opposed to the number, because
which
I
I think makes more sense.
Right, because each delivery could be 2.5 ounces, and all of a sudden now there's like a lot of marijuana in the vehicle, and perhaps a security issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but still, there's a significant consumer demand for that. It permits the delivery into cities that don't even permit having facilities, right? So, it really is an expansive license type or opportunity, really, for there to be a good distribution of cannabis on a legal, recreational basis. But obviously, it's important to ensure that it doesn't get into the hands of children, because that's always a concern under those circumstances. But these guys are, at least our clients they know they're getting regulated. They don't want to lose their license, and delivering to somebody that's underage just simply is not. It's not a risk that really is worth any sense.
Right, and I think the MRA was really sensitive to the fact that around the time when they started bringing delivery services on board, Weed Maps and Leafly and other places were having these unlicensed delivery services on there. And I had talked to several people who were patients, and they said, you know, they didn't even know that some of these were unlicensed. One of our clients actually called me and said, hey, there's this delivery service that has a similar name to ours. You need to tell the MRA that that's not us. And I went ahead and did that. But I think now they've been, I don't know if they've removed them, but there's definitely been a kind of, they've been, Weed Maps and Leafly have been put under scrutiny for having those unlicensed companies on their website.
But they still do. They're still on there, right? So like they're not getting any, like, there's not getting any penalties. They're still encouraged to do it. There's delivery services that aren't regulated, that aren't licensed, that are advertising on these websites, and presumably it's just going to continue to happen unless there's some type of enforcement, or there's some type of like action that is taken, and that's a whole question as to whether it should be a criminal enforcement or a civil enforcement, or what should be done, whether anything should be done. There's many people that say, you know what, like if a consumer wants to receive cannabis from an unlicensed dispense or a delivery service, then perhaps they should be able to do so. We're not going to get into that conversation right now. Although we can talk about hemp, right? Like, I think it's a good idea for us to talk about that, because that is a significant development in 2019 that has already had some pretty far-reaching, unanticipated impacts that are also going to travel into 2020. I am certainly encouraged by the fact that the Farm Bill, 2018 Farm Bill or 2019 Farm Bill did what it did for industrial hemp, particularly in Michigan and all over the country, which permitted the removal of the hemp from being regulated by being identified as marijuana and regulated by the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, and instead being regulated by the Department of Agriculture, which has created one, a very unregulated market and industry, and two, an opportunity for those that perhaps may have been excluded from the industry with under marijuana are now able to get into the hemp industry. I think that has been fascinating, or at least it's what was intended. But what hasn't been, I think, contemplated was the explosion of the CBD market.
Yeah, and I mean, you're seeing stores pop up left and right. There's actually one kitty-cornered Cannabis Legal Group. Haven't jumped over there to see whether or not they're actually operating in compliance with any of these unwritten rules yet. But yeah, I mean, I think, not to say it's a craze or a fad, but you're definitely seeing a lot more CBD and hemp products start coming on board, whether that's, concrete made from hemp, cat litter, business cards, paper, so on and so forth. I think one of the biggest issues going forward now is just testing and actual regulations, because the FDA still has to finalize their rules and then needs to okay Michigan's program, for example, for what it's licensing to have a fully commercial industry. The other issue with that is just testing, because I think we were talking about it earlier, was that there was some data showing that very few of these products, or a decent handful of them, are mislabeled, or there aren't any regulations. And while I think the industry in general wants to be self-regulated, or was self-regulated for so long because of federal illegality, but there still aren't standards. So there's a lot of snake oil being sold by certain manufacturers, whether it's overseas or kind of in-house. The same issue, I guess, with putting vitamin E acetate into a vape cartridge. There's some people that are putting and cutting CBD oil with some other ingredients that may or may not be safe. So you have the USDA, you have the FDA, you'll have the states also regulating it, but there needs to be a uniform way to test this, just like there needs to be that for cannabis, which again, same plant, different THC content. One's fully legal federally, the other one is not really, but they look the other way. So we're still working towards that, and we're getting there. But federal government, I think, is going to be a slower. We can get into that in predictions, but I think it'll be a little bit slower to roll out, just like it's government. So it's
yes,
take a while.
I do believe though it is going to happen. There will be some more regulation, especially as there are more allegations of products being put onto the market that are being touted as having a particular percentage of CBD, and that not being the case. We were just recently provided with a class action lawsuit on behalf of a client who there's people that are suing them federally with respect to allegations that these products are being sold fraudulently, or at least I guess it's fraudulently, with identifying a particular amount of CBD when actually it's tested and that amount isn't there. Mm-hmm. So this is something that's happening, and the more this happens and the more it begins to expose itself, the more I think that the federal government and the state legislature, perhaps the state government as well, may get involved, particularly the federal government, though the FDA, in my opinion, I think still hasn't weighed in as to exactly what they're going to do with respect to the manner in which that they're going to regulate or not regulate industrial hemp and CBD and other cannabinoids that perhaps are non-active, psychoactive. So there's a lot to be seen, I guess, with respect to what's going on.
And two, with that, when there's a new product, there's going to be new uses, and it's going to get put towards different things, and there'll be different claims, either nutritionally or medically or what have you, that the FDA is going to have to substantiate and okay for it to happen. So, if it's for if my hand hurts and I take it, versus, oh, well, now we tested it and we think it applies to this, there's going to be those claims, kind of going back and forth, whether or not they're accurate. So there's going to be a lot of people that are testing and breaking new ground that might not yet be approved, and then that can also get you in trouble for innovating too. So, whenever you're making claims on products, all of those things, adding it to food, that'll be a big issue too, with the different kinds of ways that we're seeing products. The industry's moving so fast, and the regulations, need some time to catch up for that to be fully above board.
All right, so let's talk about the national headlines that have happened within the cannabis industry in 2019. I think one of the biggest ones was the Safe Banking Act. Mm-hmm. The Safe Banking Act is a bill that was introduced into the House for many, many years. So it's not like this just started. I see the banking issue, or the lack of financial services that are available in the cannabis industry, to be the biggest issue that really hurts the industry, and many others do as well. This is probably one of the reasons why it received significant bipartisan support in the House. It was the first pro-cannabis bill that received a markup in a House committee. It got out of that committee, went to the full House, and was voted in a bipartisan fashion out of the House. Now it's on to the Senate, where there is activity happening within the Senate, not as favorable because of the Republican majority. Nevertheless, this is a bill that has gone much farther than any other cannabis legislation in the history of our nation, and that is encouraging for a number of reasons. But in particular, the fact is that the cannabis industry needs financial institutions to be able to significantly succeed and flourish.
Yeah, and that was an exciting time. Right before that passed, I know Travis and I had the opportunity to go to our capital here in Lansing and lobby some of our representatives to support that bill. Michigan was introducing and wanted to pass a resolution saying, we support you doing this, federal congresspersons. And so that was really interesting and informative to hear what the legislators had to say about it. Even if they weren't for it, they were for it being more safe and for opening up the banks to those who were following the rules. So that's definitely interesting and a good step forward. I think, unfortunately, as you mentioned, with the Senate being majority Republican and also it being an election year coming up, I really, I want this to pass. I don't know that it will. I think recently I heard there's some other stuff going on with the houses of Congress that might be taking up their dockets as well. So, we'll keep our fingers crossed that this has movement and has legs and it actually gets to the finish line. But and also with government, it's slow, one step forward, two steps back. So we'll see if financial institutions will open up the floodgates to cannabis businesses, or if it'll have to take another session of Congress to actually make that happen or not.
One interesting note is that I recently talked to Andrew Brisboe, the director of Marijuana Regulatory Agency. It was like Monday or Tuesday this week. And we were talking about banking in general, and he made a comment to me that he didn't think that the banking issue was as big as people make it out to be. He said that he believes that a majority of the industry's licensees thus far anyway have some type of banking relationship so that they can utilize in an effort to carry out their business. And I thought about it and I was like, I do see a lot of our clients. They do have banks that they're working with. I do see more banks that are coming on board, mostly of course credit unions, but providing programming by which that licensees are able to take advantage of traditional banking services, not necessarily loans, but depository services and the use of credit cards and accepting credit cards. So it is becoming more widespread. I think it just comes at a cost to the industry, just like for instance 280E does to a lot of our licensees. But there are other options that are evidently available, but it is still something that we have a lot of work to do with respect to providing that to the industry. One other national thing that I'd like to discuss, which is I think just pretty interesting anyway, Major League Baseball had removed cannabis from its banned substances use or their drugs of abuse list. From what that means, I think, is that a baseball player, Major League Baseball player, can use cannabis, find it within their system, and not be like suspended from it's not from performance enhancing drugs or just banned substance list. So this is interesting, not only because Major League Baseball did it. Major League Sports Association has done it, but it's probably something that we can look forward to other Major League sports teams, professional sports teams to also do as well, right? Perhaps the NBA next.
Yeah, and I know, in our conversations with Al Harrington, very good friend of Cannabis Legal Group, and yourself, he's a big advocate for doing that. A lot of professional athletes that I've heard told stories are always saying, they didn't take this or that because recreationally they took it to get through the grueling season, to make sure that their bodies were, able to get through that stress.
It's for medical benefit, right?
And and then you hear about what prescriptions they get on and what that can do to them too in legal prescriptions. So, when they want to use something like cannabis as an alternative therapy and then they can't do their jobs and they're prohibited from that and they lose their livelihood and then they're got a bum knee and they need to take that, that hurts. And, we use them for entertainment value, and they are very unique and provide really, they're top of the line athletes. And, so for the leagues to have that kind of, control over them to say, yeah, you can take all these and that they're fine, but then not this. It's good to see the MLB kind of loosen up on that, and hopefully the NBA, and then certainly the NFL kind of loosens up on that, because I do think, especially as we move more towards legalization in every state and then federally, something's got to give. And if they treat it like alcohol, just don't come to practice or to games on alcohol, then
it absolutely makes no sense that there's rules that prohibit sports players from using cannabis, particularly because there is medical benefit that they derive from it, and it allows them to substitute more dangerous medicines, more dangerous drugs, to the degree to which they're no longer having to use those drugs that are more seriously impairing their ability to participate. And I mean, if they're, in addition to the fact that they could get hooked on these prescription pills, it has a much more detrimental effect to their career, to their ability to play, to their ability to sustain themselves within the league, and to continue to entertain us. I mean, it just absolutely makes no sense. And so the fact that Major League Baseball has done it really, I think, opens the door for very soon that every professional franchise or every sports franchises are going to do it. They should do it. Something that you said Al Harrington talked about. We have a great video from Al Harrington that we had placed it on our website or on our YouTube channel from when he had given his presentation to one of our most recent seminars. I highly recommend that you watch it when he talks about that, because it is a big deal, and it's something that another encouraging thing that we've seen in the industry. All right, so we only have a few minutes left. Let's talk about some stuff that we can look forward to in the future. Predictions for 2020. Which one do you want to talk about first? How about this one? Will the industry unionize?
So yeah, that's a big hot button issue now, along with vaping. I think it's kind of the next hurdle as the industry continues to become more normalized and incorporated into the rest of the things that normal businesses have to deal with, like unions. I mean, when you have a workforce that arguably needs more power and leverage and representation, you think about unions, and you think about, in Michigan, we just had GM, and that strike happened for a while, or was it Chevy? So there was a strike going on, there was picketing, it disrupted the business operations. Chrysler,
it was GM. It was GM and then Chrysler. So it was GM, that was the strike.
Okay, yeah, so that disrupted business operations. I think they were losing millions and millions a day.
Oh, yeah.
And then they finally reached an agreement.
Horrific.
So what's going on in the cannabis industry now, some places in California, New York, and Michigan, which we can dive into a little bit after I kind of lay the foundation, is that they're requiring what's called a labor peace provision or a labor peace agreement, which kind of is an agreement between a licensee and a labor union to have peaceable relations and to not have work stoppages or picketing. And what we did see in the most recent rules that were released by the MRA, the draft rules that have both medical and adult use rules kind of combined into one big rule set, is that Michigan is, at least in the draft rules, veering towards having and requiring applicants to enter into labor peace agreements as part of the actual application. And we can kind of break that down a little bit more now and what that might mean. And it's honestly probably long enough to be its own show. But I think for, just to kind of tie things up, we can.
Yeah. Listen, first of all, I'm not sure where I fall on this and exactly what my feelings are about it, but I know one thing, that this is not something that was contained within the Recreational Marijuana Act. Our Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act did not include a provision whereby licensees must enter into peace agreements or and allow their labor to be unionized. There are very few other industries that require it. The alcohol industry certainly doesn't require it. The restaurants associations and the restaurants and beverage industries don't require it. why has this been included within our proposed rule set is my question. I feel as though that there clearly must have been some lobbying that occurred, and the regulatory agency, they were persuaded to include this. Now, it's not a final rule set. This is not a final law, but it's been included in there, and so it looks as though that's something, again, it's been lobbied for, and the likelihood is those people that lobbied for it are going to do everything necessary to keep it in there. So, I mean, at one point, perhaps it is a good idea, to unionize. Certainly, we would like the labor force to be protected. On the other hand, it's not something that was within our recreational marijuana law. Is it even legal for them to do that, just to include that within there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, because the MRA has the ability to govern and create rules for, actually vetting and administering the law and the licenses. Whether or not a labor peace agreement really falls within their realm to require is another question. Just kind of to read over the definition, it's an agreement between a licensee and any labor organization that, at a minimum, protects the state's interests by prohibiting labor organizations and members from picketing, work stoppages, boycotts, and other interference with the applicant's business. So it almost, I'm not really sure what parties or what labor lobbying groups are really fighting for here, but I think it's...
or if they exist, right? Yeah. I mean, that would also necessitate one to exist, right? I mean, I'm not familiar with any.
Yeah, so I think, the biggest thing that I've heard as far as complaints from applicants is that, don't tell us what to do, especially when you can't require us to do it, and especially to require it in the application initially. You sign up some contract before you even have a license. It just gets a little bit kind of, it could be a slippery slope, especially for smaller businesses that really...
Yes, that's the biggest issue. We've sought to protect small business, and this is not something that small business is going to be prepared to accept, I don't think. And certainly, I think, could be the source of some litigation if it's included. But, that's why, it's one reason we have a proposed rule set to which that we're able to respond and we're able to comment about and perhaps change the rules, have some influence on the final rules. But it's in there. I'm super interested to find out why, and more importantly, how is this going to play out with respect to our applicants, to the industry, in particular to the small business segment of our industry.
Right, because a labor union could say, no, we're not going to enter into one with you. And when you go to apply, you have to sign an attestation that says, I've entered into one and here's that agreement. And so if they say no or not willing to reach an agreement with you, then you can't even submit an application. That's a little different than capitalization for the medical side, which that was actually in the law, and they could actually enforce it and say, well, if you don't have a 300K, we can't let you move forward. But with this labor peace agreement, I'm not sure where the teeth is with that or what the basis of including that is, but I'm sure it's been talked about. I know they had the meeting in Flint recently to talk about that. They had a work group recently, so I'm sure they're workshopping it, and we'll see if it ends up in the final draft.
Okay, I think we can end the show just talking about market projections and the significant increase that we're going to see not only in the state of Michigan but federally, where it's forecasted to reach $30 billion in revenue by 2025. I remember a year or two ago it was like 20 billion. Right now, all of a sudden it's 30 billion. Not all of a sudden, but there's been a significant increase in that market projection, and obviously, I think we feel as though that's very encouraging. Perhaps still underestimated because we don't really know what new states are going to come on board in that period of time. Illinois obviously has the most recent recreational state that has earlier this year announced that they have legislatively created a recreational industry in the state of Illinois, which is obviously very, very big and is going to contribute to a significant amount of sales and probably a lot of the increase that this is projecting. But in general, that just means a lot of positive news for the industry.
Yeah, and I think kind of to go along with that trend, it's more states coming on board, more municipalities within those states opening up for both medical and adult use in those states that do have it. I think I heard South or North Dakota, one of those had enough signatures on their ballot. Florida has campaigns for adult use. There's a lot of movement, New Jersey included.
Ohio.
So, there's that. I think, like you said, $30 billion by 2025. The hemp industry is also, now that it's federally legal, once the USDA and FDA come together and the states license their own programs, there'll be even more and more opportunities, not only nationally, but internationally. And I just think, the trend it's positive trending, more stores, more products, more safety testing, more regulations. But with that is also the regulatory changes, which is just, I know California is increasing the excise tax. Missouri is talking about not taking cash payments for sales tax or on their tax. So, there will be a lot of growth, but also a lot of, things that are kind of in flux because the rules are going to keep changing. Michigan will, like we said, have topic-based rule sets. Who knows when the federal government will move and allow it either interstate or completely federally. I just think, like you said, it's trending positive, changing every single minute, and those who can adapt fast but also stay compliant will end up having a good 2020 and beyond, I think.
I think that this also reflects the misconception that there's all of these cities within the state of Michigan that have opted out, right? And there's a lot of talk about how there's not as many cities that are going to opt in as we had previously thought. But I think that all of those comments are incorrect. City after city are changing their mind. They're thinking about, and they're seeing other cities that are adopting it too, right? They're seeing their surrounding neighbors saying, hey, maybe this is a good idea. And what we're now seeing is cities that have opted in, they're actually now offering more licenses, so they've tried it out and they're saying, you know what, this isn't so bad. We're going to offer some more because they see a benefit to the city. They see the economic benefits to their city, to the community, to just people. Potential like labor. There's not crime. They're not seeing an increase in drug driving. And this is going to continue to flourish, I think, within the state of Michigan. There's 1,700 cities within the state of Michigan, and over the next year or two, I would say half of them are going to probably adopt ordinances. Yeah, that's what I think, if not more, because people forget there's a lot of small cities that they just want to have one, micro business license. We're seeing that now. I think that it's going to increase, and it's going to contribute to a market revenue that is going to far exceed expectations here in the state of Michigan. But that's what we'll see, I think, in 2020. Any closing comments?
No, I just think, it's been a great year for cannabis. It's been great to kind of grow along with the industry and see from the MMMA caregiver centers to, we have licensed medical facilities and getting someone over into the adult use and getting them that license now too. We've kind of come from the ground up, and now we're here, and now we're kind of at that, at the very beginning of it. But it's, it seems like we've come so far in such a short time, but it's really, it's taken a long time for us to get here too, I guess, not just us, but as the overall industry in America and public policy. Just very, grateful to be able to be within this and kind of on the ground floor, because it's definitely very interesting and rewarding, to kind of try to navigate this. I'm grateful too. So.
I just came from Vegas last week at the Marijuana BizCon, and it is exponentially growing. This year it's like a different show than last year. It is demonstrating that the industry is literally, it's first of all exponentially it's much larger than it is every single year, than the preceding year. But also the interest, the number of attendees here now is like 35,000. I'm sure that there's probably going to exceed 40,000 next year. Probably even maybe closer to 50. It demonstrates that it's just growing and growing and growing. There is going to be a point where it stops growing and it's going to tail off and perhaps even get smaller, but I don't even know when that's going to occur. So Michigan's got a lot to look forward to. The industry does in general. I'm grateful that we have the opportunity, like you said, to be on the ground floor and continue to assist our clients to enter into it as well. We have all of our videos are available on our YouTube channel. and on our Facebook channel. We also have everything is available on our website as well, cannabis-legal-group.com. Thank you for joining us. Happy holidays. We look forward to interacting with you in 2020. I'm Barton Morris. This is Nick Galendas, and have a great year.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, everyone.